Ethan sat at the polished, gleaming bar of an exclusive members-only club. The delicate clink of glasses, the hum of low conversations, and the expensive aroma of fine cigars surrounded him. Yet despite the luxurious surroundings, a hollow emptiness gnawed at his insides. At 25, Ethan had already lived through multiple fleeting romances, each one ending in a predictable, painful pattern. Women were drawn to his wealth, captivated by the lifestyle that his immense fortune provided, not by who he truly was deep inside. He'd become weary of it all, the constant attention, the fake smiles, the shallow relationships. It had all grown tiresome. He sat there, nursing his drink, staring into the glass as though it might hold the answers to the questions swirling in his mind. "I'm done with this, Kevin," Ethan murmured to his best friend, his voice heavy with frustration. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, lost in thought. "I don't think I'll ever find someone who loves me for who I am. They're always after the money." Kevin, Ethan's longtime confidant and childhood friend, studied him thoughtfully, his fingers absently tapping against his own drink. After a brief pause, he offered an idea that seemed as outlandish as it was intriguing. "You know, Ethan," Kevin began, leaning in with a conspiratorial look, "why don't you try something different? Why don't you disguise yourself and work at one of your own hotels?" Ethan glanced up, skeptical. "What's the point? I'd be out of place there, don't you think? A millionaire pretending to be just another employee?" He shook his head, dismissing the thought immediately. Kevin, with his mischievous grin and a spark of excitement in his eyes. "Exactly. No one would expect it. You'd get a chance to meet people who don't know about your wealth. You could see what real connections feel like." The idea caught Ethan off guard. For a moment he was silent, the implications of such a bold move sinking in. It seemed so absurd, yet strangely liberating. Kevin's suggestion felt like a breath of fresh air in the suffocating world he inhabited. "Go on, try it," Kevin continued, leaning back in his chair, his expression both encouraging and knowing. "Maybe you'll finally find someone who sees you for who you are, not your bank account." That night, after leaving the club, Ethan lay awake in his bed, tossing and turning. Kevin's words echoed in his mind, filling him with both anticipation and dread. He had always felt trapped by the expectations tied to his family's name, to the wealth that surrounded him. This idea, as reckless as it seemed, offered him a sliver of hope. The next morning, after much reflection, Ethan knew what he had to do. The plan was outrageous, but it was also his only chance at finding something real. He needed to break free, even if just for a while. He walked into his mother's office later that day, the elegant, towering woman who had built the Adams Hotel empire with an unyielding hand. Catherine Anderson was a force of nature, commanding and wise. But when Ethan shared his idea with her, her expression shifted from surprise to genuine concern. "Ethan, what are you thinking?" Catherine asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "You've never worked a day in your life. This isn't like you. How will you manage this crazy plan?" Ethan took a deep breath and steadied himself. "Mom, I'm tired of being known only as the millionaire's son. I need to experience something real. I need to know if anyone will love me, not for my wealth, but for who I am. Please, let me do this." There was a long silence. Catherine's gaze softened, and after what seemed like an eternity, she sighed, her tone one of reluctant acceptance. "You're an adult now, Ethan. I can't stop you. But remember, everything in life has consequences. Are you ready for them?" Ethan nodded resolutely, even though a part of him wondered if he truly was prepared. The following days were filled with logistics. Choosing a city far from the family's spotlight, securing a modest apartment, and arranging his first day at the hotel. The apartment was a stark contrast to the palatial mansion he had grown up in. The walls, bare and simple, seemed to echo the quiet solitude he had sought for so long. As he unpacked, he realized he didn't feel deprived by the lack of luxury. In fact, it felt oddly comforting. The next morning, Ethan dressed in the unassuming uniform of a hotel receptionist, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. As he looked at his reflection in the mirror, he hardly recognized the man staring back at him. Gone was the polished, pristine figure of the heir to a hotel empire. Instead, a young man with a simple shirt and tie, ready to blend into the background, stared back at him. When he arrived at the hotel, Melissa, the manager, greeted him warmly. She was a woman in her 30s, exuding both elegance and a grounded professionalism. Her blonde hair was neatly tied back, and her smile radiated kindness. "Welcome to the team, Ethan," she said with genuine enthusiasm. "I'll give you a tour and introduce you to the rest of the team." As they walked through the hotel, Ethan was struck by the attention to detail in every corner. The spaces, while not as grand as the hotels in his family's chain, were warm and inviting. Melissa showed him the reception desk, explaining the day-to-day tasks with patience and clarity. She spoke about the guests, the staff, and the importance of making each guest feel welcome. "This is where you'll be working," Melissa explained, pointing to the bustling reception area. "It's the heart of the hotel. You'll meet lots of people, and trust me, you'll have plenty to do." Ethan nodded, his confidence growing with each step. For the first time in a while, he felt a sense of purpose. He was no longer just the man behind the wealth. He was someone who would have to work hard, just like everyone else. As the tour continued, Ethan was introduced to several colleagues, but one man stood out to him. Edward, the 55-year-old maintenance manager at the hotel, was also Melissa's father, a man whose wisdom Ethan had grown to deeply respect. Edward was a calm, wise presence, his face lined with the stories of many years lived. He offered Ethan a firm handshake and a welcoming smile, immediately making him feel at ease. "Welcome aboard, young man," Edward said warmly. "If you ever need anything, or if you just want to talk, I'm here." In the days that followed, Ethan quickly adapted to the routine of the hotel. His work at the reception desk was both demanding and rewarding. He solved problems, met guests, and began to form genuine connections. It wasn't easy, but it was real. The interactions he had with people were grounded in authenticity, something he had longed for but never found in the superficial world he came from. Edward became a fatherly figure to Ethan. During their breaks, they often sat in the hotel's garden, where Edward shared stories of his life, offering wisdom that resonated deeply with Ethan. "You know, Ethan," Edward said one day, "life has a funny way of surprising us. Sometimes, you find something or someone that changes everything." Ethan listened, taking in the words that seemed to carry more weight than they had at first glance. He knew he was at the beginning of a new chapter in his life, and for the first time in years, he felt hopeful. Edward's advice became a guiding light, especially when Ethan confided in him about his disillusionment with past relationships. He spoke of his frustration with women who only saw his wealth and not the person he truly was. Edward's reply was simple but filled with wisdom. "Be patient, Ethan. The right person will come along when you least expect it, and when that happens, you'll know it's real." As Ethan reflected on this advice, he couldn't help but think of Melissa. Over time, his admiration for her had grown deeper than he ever expected. Her competence, kindness, and leadership had left a lasting impression on him. More than that, he felt drawn to her in a way that was both surprising and overwhelming. Though he wasn't ready to admit it, over the course of several weeks, Ethan began to notice how his admiration for Melissa was turning into something deeper. Their long conversations, shared moments of vulnerability and laughter made him realize that this was no longer just a connection. It was the start of something real, something he had been searching for. Ethan and Melissa stood in the quiet square, their hands still intertwined, the night air crisp and cool around them. The stars above seemed to twinkle brighter as they exchanged a look, one that spoke volumes. Ethan's heart beat faster as he gazed into her eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of his feelings. He had been searching for something real for so long, and now, in this moment, he realized that he had found it. "You are so special to me, Melissa," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. He leaned in slightly, his breath quickening. The words felt more profound than he could have imagined, yet they came easily from his heart. His gaze held hers, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The world around them faded, leaving just the two of them in that moment of pure connection. Melissa smiled, her eyes softening. "I enjoyed tonight too, Ethan," she replied, her voice tender. "You are special to me as well." Her words hung in the air between them, and Ethan could feel the gravity of her admission. The closeness they shared in that instant felt like a new beginning. As if on instinct, Ethan gently leaned forward, and without a word, Melissa closed her eyes. The kiss they shared was slow and tender, full of unspoken promises. When their lips parted, neither of them needed to say anything. They both knew that this kiss marked the start of something significant, something new and wonderful that neither of them had expected. For Ethan, it was the kind of happiness he had never thought possible. He had spent so long searching for love, yet it had always felt just out of reach. But now, here it was, right before him. As he walked back home that night, Ethan couldn't stop smiling. He replayed the kiss over and over in his mind, the warmth of Melissa's embrace lingering in his thoughts. Edward's words echoed in his head. True love doesn't always come when you expect it, but when it does, it feels like everything. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan truly believed in that. The days that followed were filled with a new sense of purpose. Ethan and Melissa's connection deepened with each passing conversation, each shared laugh, and every quiet moment spent together. For Ethan, this was the happiness he had been searching for. Genuine, simple, and, most of all, real. As they spent more time together, Ethan realized that he wanted to know more about Melissa's life, her history, her family, everything that had shaped her into the person he had come to admire. He felt a strong desire to understand the roots of her kindness and strength, just as he had begun to understand his own. One sunny afternoon, as they walked through the square where they had shared their first kiss, Ethan felt the right moment had arrived. He turned to Melissa, his voice earnest. "Melissa, I'd really like to meet your father. I think it's important for both of us that I learn more about your family," he said, his hand gently squeezing hers. Melissa paused, her footsteps slowing as she processed his request. She knew her father was a central part of her life, and introducing Ethan to him would be a major step in their relationship. It wasn't something she took lightly. "You know, Ethan," she began, looking at him with a mixture of surprise and affection, "I think that's a good idea. My dad is a wonderful man, and I'm sure you two will get along just fine." She smiled, her eyes brightening at the thought of her father meeting the man she was beginning to care for deeply. "How about this Sunday?" she suggested, her voice hopeful. Ethan nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves. "That sounds perfect." When Sunday finally arrived, Ethan's anticipation reached a peak. The thought of meeting Melissa's father made him feel both nervous and eager. He wanted to make a good impression, to show that he was worthy of her trust. He took a taxi to her house, his heart racing with every passing minute. When he arrived, he stepped out and took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He rang the doorbell, and when the door opened, there stood Melissa, her presence as warm and radiant as ever. She was dressed in a beautiful floral dress, and her smile made his heart swell. "You look amazing," Ethan said, his voice filled with admiration. He couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat at the sight of her. "Thank you, Ethan," Melissa replied, her smile widening. "Are you ready to meet my dad?" Ethan nodded, though his nerves were evident in the way his hand slightly trembled as he held hers. "I'm ready." They entered the house, and Ethan's heart did a double take when he saw a familiar face sitting comfortably on the couch. Edward, the maintenance manager from the hotel, the man who had been like a mentor to Ethan, was now sitting there, laughing heartily. Edward looked up, his expression transforming into one of surprise. "Ethan! Well, life sure is full of surprises," he exclaimed with a chuckle, his laughter filling the room. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, utterly shocked. "What are you doing here, Edward?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Edward, still chuckling, gestured to Melissa with a wink. "When my daughter was looking for her first job, I recommended her to the late Victor Adams, a man I've known for many years. We worked together for quite some time, and I always respected his leadership and values," he explained, his tone light. "She's been working at the hotel ever since." The revelation hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. He had never imagined that Edward knew his father. He had no idea that Melissa's father was connected to the very hotel chain he had inherited. "We don't need to mix business with personal matters," Edward continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "We should always keep things professional." Ethan spent the rest of the lunch in a daze. The connection between him, Melissa, and Edward seemed much deeper than he had initially thought. After the meal, Ethan knew he needed to be honest with both of them. He called them into the living room, feeling a knot of anxiety form in his stomach. "Edward, Melissa, there's something I need to tell you," Ethan began, his voice shaky with nervousness. "Edward, you said you knew Charles Anderson, the owner of the hotel?" "Yes, I did," Edward confirmed with a nod. Ethan took a deep breath, his heart pounding. Charles was my father. I am the heir to the hotel chain. Melissa's expression shifted immediately. The warmth in her eyes flickered, and she looked at him with shock and disbelief. A sense of betrayal flooded her, as she had never imagined that Ethan was hiding something so significant from her. Edward, on the other hand, began to laugh again. His laughter was genuine, and it caught Ethan completely off guard. "What's so funny?" Ethan asked, confusion written all over his face. Edward wiped a tear from his eye, still grinning. "You look just like your father when he was young," he said, with a nostalgic smile, his voice full of affection for the memory. Ethan stood there for a moment, processing everything. "I've been told that," he admitted, still trying to make sense of the revelation. After the lunch, there was a palpable tension in the air. Melissa stepped out into the garden, needing space to process what she had just learned. Ethan followed her, knowing he had to make things right. He found her sitting on a bench, her expression distant as she stared out at the garden. He sat beside her, trying to keep his voice calm. "Melissa, please listen to me," Ethan said gently, his voice full of sincerity. "I know I should have told you sooner. I wanted you to know me for who I am, not for my money or my position. Please understand that." Melissa remained silent for a moment, her breath steady but deep. She closed her eyes, taking in the weight of his words. Then, slowly, she turned to face him, her expression softening. "Ethan, I understand your motivations," she said. "It must have been hard for you, with everyone always approaching you for the wrong reasons. I just need some time to adjust to all of this." Ethan nodded, his heart feeling a little lighter. "I just want to be honest with you. I never meant to deceive you, Melissa. I only wanted to be myself and find someone who loves me for who I truly am." Melissa gave him a faint smile, her eyes filled with warmth. "I believe you, Ethan," Melissa said, her voice softening. "We'll get through this together." "Agreed," Ethan replied, his heart swelling with relief. A weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying lifted off his chest. The two of them returned to the house, where Edward was waiting for them, his expression one of quiet understanding. Ethan could tell that Edward, in his own way, had always known that something would eventually come to light. Ethan sat down, feeling more at ease now that the truth about his identity was out in the open. "Edward, can I ask you more about your history with my father?" he inquired, feeling that now was the time to learn more. Edward nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "Of course, Ethan, your father, Charles Anderson, was a remarkable man. I met him when I first started working at the hotel. He always made it a point to get to know his employees, to treat everyone with respect. He believed in maintaining a close relationship with all of us, and that was something rare and valuable." As Ethan listened intently, he felt a deep sense of pride in the man his father had been. Edward continued, sharing stories of Charles's dedication to the hotel and his belief that the key to a successful business was treating people well. "You've inherited much from your father, Ethan," Edward said, his voice full of respect. "He was a great man, and it's clear that you've taken a lot of that wisdom to heart." Ethan felt a swell of pride and humility. "Thank you, Edward. Those words mean a lot to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The conversation continued into the afternoon, with Edward sharing more anecdotes about Charles and the legacy he had left behind. It was during this time that Edward asked a question that Ethan had not anticipated. "And your mother, Catherine, how is she?" Edward asked, a curious glint in his eyes. Ethan paused, caught off guard. "Catherine is my mother. You know her?" he asked, surprised by the question. Edward nodded, his expression becoming more serious. "Yes, I do. But there are some things I can't tell you, Ethan. It's better to ask her yourself." Ethan was intrigued by this cryptic response but decided to respect Edward's wishes and wait until he could speak to his mother. As the evening shadows grew longer, the soft hum of conversation filled the air at the Adams mansion. Ethan and Melissa, still basking in the warmth of their earlier revelations, sat with Catherine, surrounded by the comforting embrace of home. The mansion, full of history and love, had a magical effect on them that night, weaving an atmosphere of connection and understanding. Melissa, feeling increasingly at ease in the presence of Ethan's mother, turned to him as they sat together. "Your mom is truly amazing, Ethan," she said softly, her voice brimming with admiration. "I'm so happy to be here with her, and with you." Her words, simple yet heartfelt, resonated deeply with Ethan. "I feel the same way, Melissa," he replied, squeezing her hand gently. "This means the world to me." He looked at Catherine, who was still chatting merrily with them, her smile warm and inviting. There was an undeniable sense of peace in the air, as if the world outside had faded away, leaving them in this moment of shared joy and understanding. That night, as the stars outside shimmered in the dark sky, the three of them continued their conversation, stories flowing freely between them. The laughter and light-hearted banter made the house feel even more like a home to Melissa, who was no longer just a guest, but part of the family. Ethan looked at her, his heart swelling with affection, grateful for the way she was slowly becoming intertwined in his life, and now, in his family's life as well. Later, as they prepared to retire for the night, Melissa leaned in close to Ethan, speaking softly. "Your mom is just wonderful," she murmured. "I'm so grateful to be here." Ethan smiled, feeling an overwhelming sense of contentment wash over him. It was the kind of peace he had never known before, sitting beside Melissa, knowing they had found something real. "Me too, Melissa. I couldn't have asked for anything more." As they lay down to sleep, the night felt like a perfect pause in time, peaceful, full of meaning, and completely content. The following morning, after a quiet breakfast in the garden, Ethan and Melissa walked together through the same paths that Ethan had explored as a child. The familiar garden, with its lush greenery and vibrant blooms, had witnessed countless memories, and now it was the backdrop for the beginning of new ones. Ethan felt a sense of calm that he hadn't experienced in years. His heart felt lighter, and his future seemed more certain. "Melissa," Ethan began, breaking the comfortable silence as they strolled among the flowers, the morning sun casting a gentle light on them. He paused for a moment, taking her hands in his. "There's something I've been thinking about ever since we arrived here." Melissa turned to face him, her eyes curious yet filled with a soft smile. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked, her voice filled with warmth. Ethan took a deep breath, the emotions he had been holding on to rising to the surface. "My mother and father, they had a love story based on truth, respect, and trust," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And now, I see the same in us. Since I met you, you've brought so much joy and meaning to my life. I want to spend the rest of my days with you, building a life together." Melissa stopped in her tracks, her eyes wide as she looked at him, the emotion of his words settling over her. Her lips parted in surprise, and before she could speak, Ethan dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The soft golden ring sparkled in the morning light, a symbol of the commitment he felt in his heart. "Melissa," Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly with anticipation, "will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Melissa's eyes, and she brought her hand to her mouth in shock and joy. After a moment, she nodded enthusiastically, her voice barely a whisper but full of certainty. "Yes, Ethan, of course I will." Ethan stood up, slipping the ring onto her finger, and as he embraced her, the world seemed to fall away. Melissa cried with happiness, overwhelmed by the moment. Catherine, who had been watching from a distance, rushed to join them, her face bright with tears of joy. "I'm so happy for both of you," Catherine exclaimed, her voice full of emotion as she pulled them both into a tight hug. The connection between mother and son, and now between the two of them as a couple, had never felt more real. With Catherine's heartfelt blessing, Ethan and Melissa began to make plans for their wedding. They both agreed that the hotel where they had met would be the perfect place to celebrate their love. It held so much significance for them, representing the start of their journey together. Catherine was instrumental in the preparations, her enthusiasm and dedication to the couple's happiness evident in every detail. As the days passed, the plans for the wedding took shape, each decision made with care and love. Melissa chose a simple yet elegant dress that reflected her natural beauty, while Ethan selected a classic suit that matched his personal style. They discussed every aspect of the ceremony with Catherine, who offered her guidance with a steady hand. "I want our wedding to be a reflection of who we are," Melissa said as they talked about the design for the event. "It should be intimate, full of love, something that is truly ours." Ethan agreed wholeheartedly, feeling the deep connection between him and Melissa growing stronger with each passing day. Catherine's support throughout the process made everything feel even more special, and the love story of his parents continued to serve as a constant source of inspiration. As the date of the wedding approached, the hotel began to transform into a place of beauty and elegance. The decorations reflected the simplicity and warmth that Ethan and Melissa had envisioned, a place where love would take center stage. One evening, after a long day of planning, Ethan and Melissa found themselves sitting in the garden of the Adams mansion, the stars above shining brightly. They rested against each other, savoring the quiet moments between them. "I can't believe we're getting married at the place where we met," Melissa said softly, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder. Her words were filled with wonder and joy. "It feels perfect," Ethan replied, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "It's the perfect place to start our life together. I can't wait to see you walking down the aisle." "And I can't wait to see you waiting for me there," Melissa said, her smile radiant. Together, they knew that their future was unfolding with each passing day, and that the wedding would be just the beginning of a life full of love, trust, and adventure. The day of the wedding finally arrived, and with it came a mixture of excitement and emotion. The hotel, now beautifully decorated, was a sight to behold. White flowers and soft golden lights adorned the hall, creating an atmosphere of magic and warmth. Family, friends, and colleagues gathered, their faces glowing with joy and anticipation. Catherine, radiant with happiness, moved about with grace, welcoming guests and overseeing the final details with her usual poise. In the bride's room, Melissa stood in front of the mirror, looking every bit the vision of elegance in her simple yet breathtaking dress. She was surrounded by her friends, who helped with the last-minute preparations. As she adjusted her dress, Edward entered the room, his face filled with emotion as he looked at his daughter. "You look beautiful, Melissa," he said, his voice choked with pride. "I'm so proud of you." "Thank you, Dad," Melissa replied, her eyes welling up with tears. "I'm so happy you're here with me." Meanwhile, in the groom's room, Ethan was finishing his preparations, adjusting his suit. His childhood friend Kevin, standing by his side as his best man, gave him a reassuring smile. "Are you ready for this?" Kevin asked with a grin, his voice full of warmth. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Ethan replied, his smile confident but tinged with emotion. The ceremony began on time, with all the guests taking their seats in the decorated hall. Soft music began to play and all eyes turned to the entrance. Edward walked his daughter down the aisle with dignity and love, his eyes full of pride. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he saw Melissa walking toward him, her beauty taking his breath away. He felt his heart race with joy, and as Edward reached him, he handed Melissa's hand to Ethan with a quiet, loving message. "Take good care of her," Edward said, his voice filled with emotion. "I promise I will," Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. As Catherine watched, memories of her own wedding to Charles flooded her heart. The love she had shared with him and the journey they had been on together brought tears to her eyes. She felt an overwhelming connection to the present moment, watching her son step into a new chapter of his life. The ceremony was simple, yet brimming with meaning. Ethan and Melissa exchanged vows, their words heartfelt and full of promise. "With this ring, I make you mine," Ethan said as he placed the ring on Melissa's finger. Melissa smiled through her tears and replied, "With this ring, I make you mine." When they were declared husband and wife, applause filled the air and tears of joy flowed freely. Ethan and Melissa kissed, sealing their bond with love and a future full of hope. The reception that followed was full of laughter, dancing, and unforgettable moments, marking the beginning of a new life together. Catherine stood, raising a glass in a heartfelt toast to the couple. "May you have a long and happy life together, filled with love and understanding," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Edward, Melissa's father, his eyes filled with tears, also made a toast. "I always dreamed of seeing my daughter happy, and today my dream has come true. May God bless you both," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan and Melissa, surrounded by their loved ones, felt incredibly blessed. Their wedding was a celebration of love, connection, and the unbreakable bond between them. The joy and laughter that filled the room would be memories they would cherish for a lifetime. As the evening continued, the celebration lasted late into the night, signaling the beginning of a journey full of adventure, challenges, and shared experiences. Ethan and Melissa, now husband and wife, were ready to face the world together, their hearts full of love, trust, and respect. Life had changed in ways Ethan and Melissa had never expected, but with the arrival of their new baby, it marked the beginning of yet another beautiful chapter for them. With the love and support of their families, they entered this new phase of their lives with an unwavering bond that only deepened with each passing day. A few weeks after returning from their honeymoon, Melissa began to notice subtle shifts in her body. At first, she attributed it to the changes in her routine, perhaps just the excitement of their new life together. But as time passed, the signs became undeniable. One quiet evening, with a mix of nervous anticipation, she decided to take a pregnancy test. Her heart raced as she waited for the result, unsure of what to expect. The moment she saw the positive result, a wave of emotions overwhelmed her. She quickly found Ethan in the living room, a slight unease in her eyes but a soft smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Ethan, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling just slightly with the weight of the news. Ethan, noticing the seriousness in her tone, looked up from the book he was reading, his brow furrowed in concern. "What is it, my love?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. Melissa walked over to him, took his hand in hers, and with an emotional smile, she said the words that would forever change their lives. "I'm pregnant, Ethan. We're going to have a baby." Ethan sat still for a moment, processing what he had just heard. The world around him seemed to pause, his eyes filled with tears of joy and disbelief. He stood up slowly, pulled her into his arms, and held her tightly. The joy that radiated from him was palpable. "This is incredible, Melissa," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy, we're going to be parents." He kissed her repeatedly, unable to contain his excitement. They stood there, holding each other, knowing that this was the start of a new journey, one that they would face together with all the love they had. The news of the pregnancy quickly spread through their families. It brought joy not only to Ethan and Melissa, but to everyone around them. Catherine, ever the doting mother, was radiant at the thought of becoming a grandmother. And Edward, too, was filled with pride and happiness at the news of his daughter starting a new family. "This baby is going to bring so much joy to all of us," Catherine said, her voice emotional as she hugged Melissa tightly. "It's a new beginning for all of us," Edward added, a smile spreading across his face as he gazed at the couple, knowing that this child would be a symbol of hope and love for the whole family. As the news settled in, Ethan and Melissa began to plan their future more carefully. They knew that with the arrival of their child, their lives would change in ways they could not yet fully comprehend, but they were prepared to embrace the changes with open hearts. "We want our child to grow up in an environment of love and humility," Ethan said one evening as they sat together discussing their future. "I want him to understand the value of hard work, respect for others, and humility. These are the values that matter most to us." Melissa caressed her growing belly, her eyes filled with warmth. "I agree, Ethan. We want to give him the best of us. We want him to understand the importance of respect, kindness, and the beauty of a humble life." With the baby on the way, Ethan was determined to continue working at the hotel, to remain grounded and connected to the people he cared about. "I want our child to see that work is important and that humility is an essential value," Ethan explained. The preparations for the baby's arrival were filled with excitement and love. Ethan and Melissa worked together to create a nursery in their apartment. They chose soft colors for the walls, and every decoration was chosen with care, reflecting their deep love for the little one on the way. Every tiny moment was filled with joy. Ethan often placed his hands on Melissa's belly, speaking to the baby, sharing his hopes, dreams, and unconditional love. "I can't wait to meet you, my little one," he whispered one night, feeling a soft kick in response. The anticipation grew with each passing week, and every visit to the doctor, every ultrasound was met with excitement. Seeing the images of their developing baby brought them even closer. The months of pregnancy were not just a time of waiting, but a time of deep connection and preparation. The stories of their families, of overcoming challenges, of love and resilience, served as their guide as they faced the exciting road ahead. Catherine often shared stories of when Ethan was a baby, filling the house with laughter and useful advice. "Ethan was always a bundle of energy," Catherine joked, her voice warm with affection. "Get ready for some sleepless nights," she added with a fond smile, making everyone laugh. Edward, too, became more involved, helping Ethan assemble furniture and prepare the house. As he worked alongside Ethan, it was clear how much joy becoming a grandfather brought him. "I'll always be here for you and for my grandchild," Edward said with emotion, his eyes glistening with pride. As the due date approached, Ethan and Melissa felt more prepared and confident. They knew that with the love and support of their families, they could handle anything that came their way. Together, they awaited the arrival of their son with hearts full of hope and love, ready for this new adventure that awaited them. The final days before the birth seemed to stretch endlessly, each one filled with anticipation. The countdown to their new life as parents had begun. And then, on a quiet early morning, Melissa felt the first contractions. "Ethan, I think it's time," she said, holding his hand tightly. Her voice was a mix of excitement and nervousness. Ethan, already prepared, quickly grabbed the bag and helped her into the car. They drove to the hospital, the air thick with anticipation. When they arrived, the medical team was ready, and the following hours were filled with intense, emotional moments. Ethan stayed by her side the entire time, offering words of encouragement, holding her hand and reminding her how strong she was. "You're doing great, Melissa. I love you," Ethan whispered, his heart racing with emotion as he watched her endure the pain of labor. Ethan squeezed Melissa's hand, doing everything he could to reassure her. After several hours, the sound of their baby's cries filled the room, and the couple's hearts swelled with joy. Ethan and Melissa looked at their little miracle, tears streaming down their faces. "He's perfect," Melissa said softly, her voice breaking with emotion as she looked at the tiny being in her arms. "Yes, he is," Ethan agreed, his voice thick with love. "Welcome to the world, Charles Edward." The name they chose for their son was a tribute to the men who had shaped their lives, Ethan's father Charles and Melissa's father Edward. These two men had been central figures in their love story, and naming their son after them was a beautiful way to honor their legacy of love, wisdom, and strength. The news of the birth spread quickly, and it wasn't long before Catherine and Edward arrived at the hospital, eager to meet their grandson. "He's beautiful," Catherine said, holding little Charles Edward in her arms. "I'm so proud of you both," she added, her eyes filled with joy. Edward, emotional and teary-eyed, looked at the baby. "He has Ethan's eyes," he commented, "and Melissa's strength," he added with a proud smile. The birth of Charles Edward brought the two families even closer, as everyone rallied together to support the new parents. Ethan and Melissa quickly adapted to their new routine, and the sleepless nights, though challenging, were filled with love and laughter. As they rocked their baby to sleep one night, Ethan said, "We're doing this together, Melissa. That makes everything easier." "Yes," she agreed, smiling at him as she held their son. "We're a team." The months passed in a blur of milestones. Charles Edward's first smile, his first words, and his first steps. Each moment was celebrated with the kind of joy and wonder only a new parent can know. Family gatherings became even more special, with everyone coming together to share in the happiness. "He's the joy of our lives," Catherine said one afternoon as she watched her grandson play in the garden. "And a true symbol of a new beginning for all of us," Edward added with a smile. Ethan and Melissa, knowing how much they had been given, were determined to raise their son with the same love, respect, and humility that had shaped their own lives. Watching Charles Edward grow, they felt a deeper connection than ever before. They knew that their love would always be the solid foundation for their family, and together they would face any challenge life threw their way. With the arrival of their son, a new chapter began for Ethan and Melissa. The future was bright, full of promise, and full of love. With hearts full of gratitude, they knew that the best was yet to come. And so, Ethan and Melissa's journey continues, filled with love, growth, and the promise of a beautiful future. Their story reminds us that no matter where we come from or what challenges we face, love, trust, and humility will always guide us through. As they embark on this new chapter of parenthood, we see that family, support, and the bonds we create along the way are what truly make life meaningful. We hope this story has touched your heart and inspired you to cherish the people around you, embrace change, and pursue a life filled with love and purpose. What do you think about James and Melissa's journey? How do you believe love can overcome even the toughest challenges? Leave a comment below to share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.